Hey lads, I am on my way to the Rising Star Grand Prix tournament in Mesa, Arizona, and it's a 4 round, 45-minute plus 10, and I'm in the under 1600 section. So 1399 to 1599. So I'm right in about the middle of the section. Don't know all the players that are playing, so maybe we'll be playing some new people today. Well, I'm hoping to play some good, solid chess, and we'll see how we can do. Good luck, me. You lads are in luck. For this review, Chester is joining us. He has his face turned away from the camera right now, though, because he seems a wee bit unhappy with me for some reason. And maybe that's because of how this tournament went. In game one, I was playing against a young man named James, and his rating was 1292. My rating was 1480 for this game. I've played against James several times, and always it's a lot of fun. He started the game with e4. I went into a Caro with c6. He went d4. I went d5. And here you can either take the exchange, push the advance, or play some kind of main line with knight c3. That's often the move. He played the advanced, so I advanced my pawn to c5. This is called the Botvinnik Karl's defense, and he played c3. Now, often you can bring your knight out here and put the pressure onto this pawn on d4. I don't really like to do that. I would rather just, instead of dealing with complications of knight here and then he takes here, it's just a bit of a weird sort of game. I don't really know what's going on. I can take this one, but I don't get what I want in the Caro. I like to just instead take this pawn off, and if they capture with queen, I mean, that's very surprising. I can jump here with tempo, and you can understand why they wouldn't want to do that. But in this position he took, which is the best response, the typical move, and now I can move my knight to c6. So a sort of different move order. Here he brought his knight out, I pinned his knight to his queen, and he brought his bishop out, pinning my knight to my king. I play e6 just to solidify the pawn chain, and now my whole focus is going to be on this d4 pawn. I want to win this pawn in whatever way I can. Right now I have one piece looking at it. I can also add a queen here, so I'd have two pieces looking at it, and add a knight to f5, so I'd have three pieces looking at the pawn. That's my goal, and so this is what I went for. He brought his knight out. I start my maneuver of adding my knight to f5 so I can attack the pawn. He brings his bishop out, and here I can't move this knight to f5 because he takes my queen. I want to move my queen to b6 regardless, so I thought, well, this is just a good way to do that. I moved my queen to b6. He takes my knight. I take his bishop. In the position right now, I really only have one attacker on this pawn, and he really only has one defender because both of the knights are still pinned. So I think probably the best move for James would be just to castle and then focus on this pawn, which is really the target of the whole game. And so here in this position, he played the move queen to a4. The reason I don't think queen a4 is all that good is because it just doesn't really enable anything. Yes, there's more pressure on this knight, but the knight's defended by a pawn, and so he's never really able to take this. Just sitting here with the bishop was fine because it's pinning and being useful, but having the queen and the bishop here doesn't really enable all that much more. So in this position, I just castled, and here he can take here, but I'm threatening to win this pawn. I can capture here, here, and then take the pawn with my knight or with my queen. Here he decided to take off my knight, and I captured his knight on f3. He took back on f3, and I took the bishop on c6. In this position, I'm still looking at this pawn, and he's still defending. So I'm going to try to see, is there a way I can keep attacking it? He plays the move b3. Now, I'm not entirely sure what this move enables. Maybe he just wanted to maneuver this knight and have the queen defended by something else, but here I can simply go bishop to b4, and the point of bishop to b4 is not that it just attacks a piece that is pinned, but
it also blocks the queen's defense of this pawn. So now I'm actually attacking this pawn, which is not defended. And so in this position, he moved his rook over to c1 to protect the knight, and I could take the pawn. Now it does look like I've given him another pawn for free, but I calculated that if he takes that pawn, which he did, I can move my rook over to c8. And now I actually have 1, 2, 3 attackers on c3, which means I'm most likely going to win this piece. He can't move the piece because it's pinned. And so he's in a bit of trouble here. He has to defend his queen. He puts his queen on d7 and we capture the knight for free. Here he moves his king because he's in check. And I have several good moves here. The top move by the engine is queen d2, just going after this rook and also looking at this square. It looks pretty nice. I could also then queen d2, bishop d4, and just go for a quick checkmate. But here I just tempoed his queen. He moved his queen. Then I go queen d2. He moves his king. And this move is clever because it gets out of danger and it also defends his rook with his other rook. Here I went bishop d4, looking at that beautiful f2 pawn, which he promptly defended. I move my rook over to e8, tempoing his queen again. He moves over to d7. I move my king to f8. And the reason is I want to get my rook into the action, but if my king's on g8 and I move my rook, he can just take this one with checkmate. So I didn't want him to be able to take this beautiful rook here. And so here he checks me. I move my rook up to e7, and he moves over to a6, going after this pawn, which is defended, but he didn't really have any other good squares. Like this one and this one were both hit by my pieces. So going over here makes sense. I pull the rook in now, looking at the beautiful f2 square. Here he pins my rook on e7 by coming to d6, so the rook can't move, but I'm not too worried because my king's protecting it, and if he comes here, I can pull back. He pulls back up and I can move over. I take the pawn on f2. He checks, I move down. He checks, I move over. And here he attacks my rook with a checkmate in one threat. And I can simply pull back, or I can go for the beautiful bishop e1 check. He can't take the bishop because I'm hitting him with the queen. And so he has to move his king. He puts his king on h3, and that is queen g2 checkmate. The bishop cuts off the retreat square, and the queen holds everything else at the same time as checking the king.
Hey Chester, well, how do you think James played?
Oh, okay. He says James played really well. Only two real things was queen a4 was just not that helpful, and it's probably better to get castled first. And also b3 just was a big mistake because it allowed my bishop to come in and hit the pinned piece. So if he had just castled earlier, then I'm not pinning that knight to the king. And also queen a4 was just a bit slow. It didn't really enable him to do anything. But overall, a solid game from James. And the engine says that I played this with a 92.6% accuracy and James with a 76. Let's jump into game 2. A very exciting Jobava London. All right, lads, I had to put Chester back. He was getting a little out of hand, but here we have game 2 against another young man named James, whose rating was a wee bit higher, 1483, so very similar to my own. And I had the white pieces this game, so I hit him with the Jobava London, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop f5. And against the early bishop, I was looking in the engine, I was reviewing some of my previous games. You have to hit him with f3 immediately. Now, bishop f4 is still an okay move, but hitting him with f3 immediately, as soon as that bishop ever comes to f5, just play f3. Now, I do always like to get my first 3 moves in the Jobava and then hit him with f3. I recently got into trouble in an online game that I played where I played bishop f4 and then I played e3 and then I played f3. And the reason this was bad was because they were able to make some room for their bishop to escape to without me getting my pawn push in. So always just in your mind, lads, try to play f3 as soon as you can. So here he went e3, I went e6, I went f3. He brought his bishop out. And I took his bishop off. He took off with his queen. and then I hit him with e4 instead of g4. Now, the reason I can do e4 is because the knight hasn't come to f6. He prioritized so much in this game getting both of his bishops out without developing his knight. And there's always a rule in chess, develop your knights before your bishops. Now, in this case, it's not a big deal, but because his knight's not on f6, we can play the pawn push in the center, which I think is a little better. He pulls back, and I make a slight inaccuracy. I play e5. Now, in this position, my best move is queen d2. Not the most obvious move, but it just wants me to castle as soon as possible. Get my pieces developed and castle ASAP. e5 was not a terrible move, but it wasn't the best move. The reason this move isn't great is because he could have played queen b4 looking at this pawn, and I had actually thought if he does play queen b4, I was going to play a3, and this is a common queen trap where you trap the queen, but it doesn't work here because there's a bishop looking at c2. So here I might have fallen into this stupidly. Queen takes, thinking I have trapped the queen. I'm hitting here, the bishop's hitting here, the pawn's hitting here, the pawn's hitting here, the knight's hitting here. He can't come to these squares because of the rook. And so he's completely trapped, but the bishop's looking here and the queen's looking here. So I have to remember, if there is a bishop outside the pawn chain, this queen trap doesn't work. However, not to be feared, he played the move queen d8. And so my position is totally fine here. We push Harry, h4. He goes h5, not allowing me to play a g4, h5 and hit the bishop. However, now that he doesn't have his h-pawn defending the bishop, we can get rid of the bishop. And so we play the move bishop d3. Now, bishop d3 is good, but if there's a pawn here, it can recapture and the rook gets active and it hasn't ruined his structure too much. He can still castle. But if we can ever capture and the pawn takes, the f-pawn takes on g6, then we have a very good position. So that is another tip just to keep in your minds when you're playing the Jobava London. Always remember to trade off bishops when the h-pawn has moved. And that's why you do the pawn push first, so that there's no h-pawn defending. He trades, I take back, and he puts his knight on h6. The position is very equal here. I castle. He plays c6, just solidifying with that triangle Slav setup. And in this position, I played the move g4, trying to push on the side of the board away from my king, where he might want to be castling. I think my position is pretty good here. He brings his other knight into the game, knight d7, and I was thinking, oh, maybe he's going to castle this way. I'm not sure. I couldn't really quite decide what was going on yet. And it's really nice when you have the enemy king castled, you know where your whole attack's going, but I wasn't able to fully see that yet. Here I had to really have a think about how I'm going to make any kind of push here. You can see this pawn wants to push up, but the problem with pushing up is his knight jumps to f5, attacks my pawn here, and his queen's seeing the pawn as well. So this doesn't work. So I thought maybe I have to push this one up instead and maneuver my pieces a little bit differently. I was a little confused on what to do. Then I came up with this plan. Knight e2, knight g3, and then it defends the f5 square and I can push the pawn. That looked pretty good. So that was what I went for. Top engine move. Here he moves his queen to e7, getting ready to castle. So looking at this position, I actually saw that if pawn takes, knight takes, it looks like I'm losing a pawn, but I saw I had queen g3 hitting his knight, and when the knight moves, I can take on g7. So this was in my mind, and I realized that after having played knight g to e2, and I thought, oh, if my knight's on g3, then I don't have that ability. My knight goes to g3. I'll just show you the moves. Take, and now my queen can't come to g3 anymore, and I'm just not doing well. I can't win this pawn back. So moving to g3 would have been a mistake, and so instead I moved the knight to f4, a square where it attacks this pawn, and I'm attacking twice, and I thought this looked a lot better. He still can't take here because if he takes here, I go here, and the knight has to move, maybe back to h6, and I can take on g7. I'm doing very well here. So in this position, my opponent castled his king, and I knew my position was good. I was feeling very confident here. I could already see I can win a pawn here. So I thought knight takes h5 looks very tempting. But then I thought, what if I instead push g5? I had to think about this. I thought g5, where's his knight going to go? Let's see. g5, his knight jumps to f5. Then I thought, wait, my pawn's here. If you ever get a pawn to g5 in the Jobava, you often want to push it to g6. If I push it to g6, I thought if knight takes, hitting rook and queen looks very good. So then I thought g5, knight f5, g6, and I saw pawn f6. So if the pawn comes to f6 instead of taking, that looked good for him. And then I thought, if his pawn comes to f6, maybe I can capture here. And then what's going on? I'm trying to figure this out in my mind. And I saw, well, if I capture on f6, maybe he takes back with knight. Maybe he takes back with queen. Maybe he takes back with pawn. Whatever he takes back with, having a rook on e1 looking at e6 is going to be beautiful. And so I made the stupid move. Rook e1. Rook d to e1. And this is a very stupid move because I could have just won a pawn for free. I could have just taken on h5. But I just complicated everything in my head and I didn't take the simple pawn that I knew I had worked so hard to get. So this is a lesson to myself. Owen, if you've worked hard for something, don't look for anything more. Just take the free pawn. I had outplayed my opponent up to this point, and I thought I got a good advantage, and I didn't take it. After the game, I chatted with James, and he said, "Why didn't you take the pawn?" And I said, "I don't know. I should have done it." In this position, I played rook e1, d-e1. He took the pawn here. I recapture, he takes, and now this doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because he can come back to h6, and now nothing works with taking here because he's castled his king, and the rooks see each other. And so taking here would be the biggest blunder, rook dg8. And I had a big think about this. I was like, does this work? I thought, can the knight jump to g6? Hitting here, hitting here. I tried to see a way out of this, but I just wasn't coming up with anything. I saw, yeah, he can just capture here. I take with check. He moves here and I don't win his rook back. There's nothing else I can do here. He can even come here and then he's tempoing my knight and my knight can't even get out. Knight takes c6 is my best move here and he just captures and he's just completely up. He's doing very, very well. So I saw I can't take on g7 here. And so this move was very good. He got a pawn and now I'm just down a pawn. And so I tried to think, what's the best way I can fight? And so I saw the move h5, just push my own pawn on. And maybe I can exert some pressure here somehow. Maybe my rook can come over, we could pile up and then take something. I don't know. He moved his knight to f5, tempoing my queen. I played queen g4, just trying to stay as active as possible. The best move here was queen f2, defending the two squares that the knight can jump to. And then we have to play over on the queen side. Maybe something else happens over here. But coming forwards was not correct. So now he starts to get his counterplay going on the queen side. He plays knight b6. Here my best move is knight c to e2, defending the pawn. But I actually just went for this. I saw, yes, he can take here. But I thought maybe if he takes here, then I could take here. And yes, he can tempo me, but I can come here and I'm totally fine. His knight's not holding this pawn anymore either. But he went for this move. I defended. He moves his king over, just playing very patiently, waiting for me to mess up. And mess up I did. b3. I did not see the queen check. And here he just absolutely destroys me with almost perfect chess. Check. King c2. And now he has a forced checkmate, which he found. It's a beautiful checkmate. One of the most beautiful I've seen in an over-the-board game. Check. King c1. Check. King b1. Check. King a1. Check. King a2. Check. Sacrificing his knight. King a3. Check. King b4. Check. King c5. check, block with the pawn. He takes, and this is my only opportunity in this whole sequence where I haven't been checked. It's a forced mate in 3 if I find knight takes d5. If I would have played knight takes d5, he may have been tempted to take back with his rook. It looks good, but then it's actually not a forced mate anymore. I can actually get out on c4 and run this way. But if he just takes back with the e-pawn, then there's no escaping, and he's just coming in here and checkmating me. So I didn't find this move. I probably should have tried, but I played the next best move, queen e2. He checks on a5. I block, and he mates me with his queen on b5. James played fantastically. I mean, he really played fantastically. The opening was better for me, and I could have won a pawn and been okay, but he played really solid. Yeah, I just have to step up my game and take my slow advantage. You know, I can't look for fireworks and explosions and just ripping everything open with a move like rook to e1, like just so bad. But it is what it is. He played a very good game, and his accuracy was 89.4%. Mine was 71.8. I think I would have had a 90% plus accuracy game if I had just taken that pawn and slowly squeezed him. But it is what it is. You make mistakes. So it was a fun game. Let's jump into game 3. Game 3, I played against a young man whose name was not James, but in fact Jaden. I had played Jaden once before and beaten him with the black pieces. And in that game he played 1 d4, but this game he played 1 e4. And so we did not have a Dutch defense. We had a Caro Kann. So c6, d4, d5, and he took the pawn. So this was the exchange Caro Kann. I recaptured. He put his bishop on d3, which means I can't put my bishop on f5, and I can't put my bishop on g4. And so in this situation, you often just develop your knights first. So knights get developed. He goes c3. I develop my other knight. He brings his other bishop out. And I can now put my bishop on g4 because my knight on f6 is defending it. These are all book moves. They were played very quickly. Here he put his queen on b3, which is a move I haven't really seen too much. And often I get a bit nervous with my Caro Kann because when the queen and the bishop can come out onto this diagonal, I feel like a lot of stuff can happen and I get very uncomfortable. I think in this position, I just need to look and see what is he threatening. He's hitting this pawn on b7, and I need to not worry too much and just play queen d7. I mean, that looks very obvious. Just defend it. And then I can play e6 and get my bishop out and swap off stuff at some point. But the move I played was a very weakening move. I played instead the move b6. And the reason this is so weakening is because now there's no pawn defending this knight, and this knight could be pinned to my king. And so he played the move queen a4, pinning the knight. Now in this position, I'm actually okay if I find the move bishop back to d7, but that is not a very obvious move for someone who's tried to develop their bishop and kind of have to undevelop it again. However, he moved his queen once and then twice, so I should be totally okay moving my bishop once and then twice. But here I instead tried to develop another piece, and I played the move rook to c8. I'm defending the knight, but here he attacks my knight again. He misses the idea, remove the defender. The rook is under attack. It's defending here. The bishop is hitting this square and this square, so I can't keep defending the knight. Here I would have had to play bishop back to defend, and yes, he takes here, I take here, and we're defending fine, but he's up the exchange. So this was a very bad move by me. He plays bishop to b5. I'm still alive. I'm still okay, but I really need to play bishop d7. I don't look at that move, and I think I can defend with queen d7. The problem is the queen is now the one that's going to be under fire, and that's almost as bad as the king being under fire. This piece is still pinned, and I'm not really focusing on it. Now he's able to just get more pieces into the action. He brings his knight to d2, and I know his plan. He wants to come here, he wants to come here, and then he wants to attack the pinned piece. There's nothing I can do about it. I push the pawn to e6. He brings in another piece. I take. I go bishop d6. He takes, I take. And now he jumps in, attacking the pinned piece, and I haven't been able to get castled. I castle. He takes. And now I'm just in big trouble. I really can't do a whole lot. The move I play is the best engine move, a6. And he takes with the idea of going a b5. If he takes here, then I take here. Maybe just winning this piece back somehow. But here he moves his bishop to b7. He won't have any of it. I push the pawn, thinking maybe I can just force this guy away. Here I really should play rook to c7, and then he takes this pawn. But I don't want to give him more material. This is not looking fun. So I attack his queen. Here he just takes, I take, he takes, and I'm thinking maybe there's a way I can trap his bishop. Maybe there's some way for me to just stop him. And so I play rook b8, defending the pawn, and then hoping that I can maybe get in and attack his bishop somehow. Maybe I could get this piece over and attack his bishop somehow. But he won't have any of it. He plays a4, allowing his rook to defend his bishop. I take, he moves his knight over to d3. I attack his bishop, and he just defends it. So I'm really just down a whole bishop here. You know, there's not a whole lot I can do. A bishop and a pawn. And so the rest of this game kind of is quite a long game, but I've already lost. So I'll just show you the moves and we'll go through it fairly quickly here. Rook to a8, attacking this piece twice. I try to bring my knight in to do something. He pulls back, looking at trades. I take, he takes. I move my knight around, trying to get active. Maybe I can come here and attack this and double his pawns and do something. He castles. And then he just pulls back, defends the pawn on b2. I play f6, trying to get some sort of push in the middle here. He won't have that. He defends the square. I bring my knight into the action. Just not a fantastic game. Some pieces get traded, and I'm just down a knight here. And there's a lot of hopping around this game. A lot of hopping around. An interesting moment coming up here where he checks my king. And I thought about this. I thought, if he just plays his knight to h4, I'm completely toast. It says it's an inaccuracy, but honestly, this is a very good move. Like, I can't come here because he's got me. And now he can just use his king to get the rest of my pieces. Instead, he just keeps hopping around and eating my pieces. And eventually, after about 60 more moves, I succumb to the pawn push, which is not very fun. But he does make it work in the end. And here he's got a rook and a queen against my poor lonely king. I have to go to g5. He goes h3, just stopping any advancement of my king. So I have to run back. Here he plays rook d5, just cutting off my retreat squares. I have to go to h7, and then he goes rook h5 check. I have to go to g6, and he basically just ladder mates me, sort of, where I'm forced this way. The check comes here. I'm forced this way. And he checks me on f7. A well-played game by my opponent, Jaden. He played with an accuracy of 90.4. I played with an 86.1. The game was close, but not really, because I just allowed myself to get pinned in the early game. When I play the Caro Kann, I'm not going to be afraid of pulling my bishop back to d7 in the future. I have to remember, if he moves his queen twice, I can move my bishop twice. That's okay. Alright lads, let's jump into game 4. A game where I played the Jobava London and had a very nice opening. Let's see what happens. I don't know about you guys, but over the board tournaments kind of drain me, and by game 4 I'm feeling kind of destroyed. So maybe I'll take a buy in round 4 in the future. I don't know. But yeah, game 4, I had the white pieces. This was an opponent where I had played the Jobava London against before and had a very nice winning position and lost. It was back in like January or February. But yeah, this game went very differently. Pawn to d4. He went knight to f6. I went knight to c3. And he played g6. And if your opponent plays g6 and does not fight for the e4 square, where he should be playing d5 and fighting for it, you can play e4. I get a huge center. He plays d5, a move too late, and I push on his knight, forcing his knight to move twice. My center is very nice. He plays back to d7, and here I have over a 1 point advantage already because I can just grab this pawn in the center, which I do. Here he plays bishop to g7, looking at a pawn prism. Not a great move. I have nearly a 2 point advantage here. I play bishop to e3, defending the pawn. It's a good move. My best move here would have been knight back to f4. Not the most obvious move, but just getting it out of danger. There's now no discoveries on it. I don't know, something tricky could happen, but good to know. And in the future, I will be playing the knight back just to avoid any tactics. Here I play bishop e3, just defending the base of the pawn chain. He attacks the pawn chain, and I had a very long think in this position, a very long think. I thought maybe we could play f4, defending the top of the pawn chain another way, and so if he takes here, then I could maybe take here or take here. Maybe I should play c3, just defending it, so take. I wasn't entirely sure what to do. I came up with a move knight f4, just defending both pawns. An inaccuracy, but still I'm winning the position. He brings his knight into c6, attacking this pawn twice. And here I had a very long think. But I should have gone with the simple c3. c3 just defends the pawn. But instead I played queen d2, hoping to castle and defend with a rook and a queen. Not good by me. Already I've lost my advantage. Here he takes. I recapture with bishop. He takes my pawn on e5, and again, I have a very nice position because I can take back the knight. He takes, and here I just quickly took his knight off, but there's actually the beautiful bishop b5 check, bishop d7, bishop takes. But here, if he takes back with knight, I take his bishop in the corner. So he can't do that. He'd have to take with queen. And here I can just take on e5. He captures on e5, and I can long castle here, defending this with 2 pieces. And although I'm not up any material, my position is very, very good. He can castle here, but I have rook he1 attacking this piece. He needs to defend it. f6 looks reasonable. And here queen b4, setting up a beautiful discovered check, winning the queen. Bishop d6 would stop that. I would have to come back here, attacking the pawn on a7, and king b8 defends it. But here I can just take on e7. He can't capture me with queen because then I win his queen. He can't capture me with bishop because then I win here. And so I would just be up a pawn here. Now I didn't see all this. This is quite a lot of calculation. Back in this position, I didn't find the check. And instead, I just took his knight. He recaptured. I castle. He moves his bishop to d7. And I have a comfortable position. I have a better position because my pieces are more active. But here I go. Bishop c4. And this is a point in the game where I think we can learn something. Often I have the bad habit of responding to the danger by moving my piece. So here my knight's in danger. It's attacked by a piece. And the common low-level thought process is, oh, my piece is in danger. Let me just move it. So I can move it here. I can move it here. I can move it here. Get it out of danger. When actually what I should be thinking is, how do we get another piece into the fight? I could have done this. He doesn't have this move because we can take it with the knight. And I'm doing very well here. He can't take here because then I take this with check. And he has to move his king. Yeah, maybe he blocks here, but then I just win this pawn too. He can't take here with his queen because I take here, and his bishop can't take my queen because it's check. This would have been very nice for me. In this position, when he attacked my knight, I foolishly put my knight on e3, and now his position is winning. He moves his queen to c7, preparing to castle. I move my pawn up to g3 because I don't want to have my rook tied down to the defense of this. He castles. Here I think, okay, I'm just going to attack his piece, force it to move, but it doesn't force it to move. Here he has actually just a very nice position, but he has a tactical win here by not responding to the threat by moving his piece out of danger, which is still an okay move. I mean, he's doing fine in this position, but he's able to attack one of my pieces, even though his piece is in danger. The same sort of thought process that I should have had earlier in the game. Here he attacks my queen and my rook, and I'm just toast here. I move my queen, he takes my rook, I take his bishop, but he's up the exchange, and so now I have to just play completely down. The rest of this game, nothing too exciting. I'll just show you the moves. I'm just getting cooked. And here I foolishly make the mistake of going a4, just knowing that it's lost, but he finds the checkmate in 3. I have to put my king over here. Queen g4, checkmate. Beautiful mate on the board, but this all came down to just not playing the most active moves, responding to his pawn attack by moving my piece instead of responding to his pawn attack by developing another piece and attacking him. I need to play more actively, and that's what I learned in game 4. This tournament, I lost a lot of rating. I went from 1480 down to 1434. I only had the 1 point, so not a good performance by me. And in this game, I played with an accuracy of 68.2. My opponent played with an accuracy of 84.7. Again, my accuracy could have probably been around 90% if I had just kept to that opening advantage and calculated better in the opening. I didn't look at the beautiful bishop b5 check. And I should have considered that more. And yeah, I thought I was using my time well this game, and I was using it a lot more than my opponent, but I also didn't play super actively when he attacks my piece. I could have forced his bishop to move away, is what it is. You learn things every tournament, and I think I've learned some valuable lessons here. In game 2, I should have taken the pawn. In game 3, I should have moved my bishop back to defend my knight on f3. And in this game, I should have played more actively by moving my rook and attacking his piece, even though I'm in danger, and also looking for intermezzo checks. You learn lots of things every single tournament, and hopefully I can put these lessons into practice in my next tournament. I just have to say, I was very happy that I didn't play a James in game 4 or a Jaden in game 4. I played a Siddharth, and Siddharth is a cool name. Not that James or Jaden is not a cool name. It's just there's a lot of J names running around, and it was cool to play an opponent with an S name. Hopefully we'll be able to get some wins at these tournaments soon enough and get up to 1500. I'll see you all very soon. Bye for now.